Hello everybody and welcome to the fish tank. Today we'll be talking about probably the most popular concept in all of basic economics, supply and demand. So you see supply and demand curves come up on the news and in the media all the time. But have you ever stopped and really thought about why the supply curve is sloping upward and why the demand curve is sloping downward, and what are the mechanisms in terms of individual people in the economy that are causing these shapes in the supply and demand curve? It may seem like a silly question because we all kind of just take those shapes for granted, but if you really understand what is the mechanism causing those shapes to be the way they are, it'll make understanding every concept that comes afterwards in economics a lot more intuitive. And so today we're going to be simulating a microeconomy, and we'll see these supply and demand curves emerge out of individual decisions. Because at the end of the day, even though a supply and demand curve is trying to capture a population of producers and consumers, those populations are made up of individuals who are choosing the things that are rational for them based on certain conditions. And so our individuals today are just these 6 folks. So in the fish tank, we have 2 sets of people. We have the red producers who are producing our good. Today our good is the shell, the humble shell found in most oceans. And then the other group of people are the consumers who are trying to buy this shell. So the producers, these red octopuses on the left, are producing shells. Each one can produce 1 shell. And the consumers, these blue fish on the right, are hoping to buy these shells from the producers. Now, besides just looking a little bit different based on their personalities, you'll notice a different dollar amount on each individual here. And that is going to be at the heart of how the supply and demand curve emerges. So let's go ahead and dive, no pun intended, into that. So let's start with our producers here. So what's going on with this guy with the top hat here? So this guy has a $1 on him. And what that means is that this person is able to produce a single shell for $1. And so the implication there is that this individual here would only sell that shell. This person would only sell that shell for anything above $1. Why? Because if they were asked, would you sell that shell for 50 cents? They would say no, because I had to pay a whole dollar to produce it, so that would just leave me in the negative. So this person would only sell for any price above $1. And now these individuals down here are very similar. It's just that this middle individual with these cool sunglasses here is able to produce that same shell, but for $2. Now the natural question arises, why are these different? How come this person's able to produce it for $1, but this person has to pay $2 to produce it? And that's just kind of due to the natural diversity of resources, access to resources in the economy. For example, let's say that this individual inherited a shell making factory from his father, and therefore is able to produce shells much more efficiently. Let's say this person did not, and therefore it costs more resources, maybe in the form of time, raw materials, in order to produce the exact same good. And finally, we have the third individual, Pirate Octopus. Pirate Octopus is able to produce a shell only for $3. And the same story that held for Top Hat Octopus holds for Sunglasses Octopus and Pirate Octopus as well, which is that Sunglasses Octopus would only be willing to sell that shell for anything above $2 and above $3 for Pirate Octopus. So that is the story going on with our producers. Now let's talk about the other side of the market, our blue fish, or our consumers. So they also look different based on the personalities, but the more interesting part for this video is going to be, of course, the dollar amount on each of them. So our top individual here, with a $1, you might already see where this story is going, but this person, this individual, values a shell at $1. What that means is that if you ask this individual, I can either give you $1 or I can give you a shell, they are indifferent. They would choose either one. It's the same exact value to them. But the more interesting case is that if you offer this person a shell for 50 cents, then they would definitely buy it because they put a value of $1 on that shell, and if they only have to pay 50 cents for that shell, it's a no-brainer. On the other hand, if you offer them a shell for $1.50, they would not buy it because the amount they would pay exceeds the value they would get from the shell, and therefore it is not acceptable to buy it for them. Same exact story for these 2 folks. So Sleepy Fish has a $2 value on the shell, so they'd be willing to pay up to $2 to get that shell. And Pirate Fish is willing to pay up to $3 to get that shell. And that's the story of our microeconomy here. Now we'll get back to this point later, but of course in a real microeconomy you're going to have hundreds to thousands to even millions of producers and consumers, but that does not change the story much at all. Speaking of the story, let's get into it here with this price versus quantity graph. So it's important to note what is going on the X and Y axes. On the Y axis, which is actually a more convenient place to start the story, interestingly enough, is the price of a shell in the economy. So it can be $1, it can be between $1 and $2, all the way going up to $3. So this is how much any individual would need to pay a producer in order to purchase a shell in the economy. The x-axis here is the quantity of shells that are either being produced or demanded based on a certain price level. So for example, if the price is $1, we would read this way to figure out how many shells are first of all being produced by the producers and how many shells are being demanded by the consumers. So now that we understand what's going on the X and Y axes here, let's go ahead and just start telling a story and see how these supply and demand curves emerge for us through the story. Let's start our story down here. So let's say that the price of a shell is currently at 50 cents. So we'll just say the price of a shell is right here at 50 cents. Now, who's going to come out of the tank? Who's going to participate in this economy? Let's start with the consumers. Would this guy here, who puts a value of $1 on a shell, be willing to pay 50 cents? Of course, it is below the value. So this person is ready to participate in the economy. Same thing with these two folks. In fact, they put even more value on the shell and they're only trying to pay 50 cents for it. And so they would both also choose to come out and participate in the economy. So we got all of the consumers ready to pay that price. Well, that's great, but now let's go ahead and look at the other side of the market, the producers. Let's start with this guy, the top hat octopus. Would top hat octopus be willing to produce a shell for 50 cents? No way, because it costs $1 to produce that shell, and just paying 50 cents, getting 50 cents for it is not worth it. And that story just gets even worse with eyeglasses octopus and pirate octopus. They're able to produce a shell for even more, and so of course they would not be willing to accept just a measly 50 cents for this shell. And therefore, at a price of 50 cents, the amount of shells that are demanded is 3, because all of these consumers are demanding a shell at that price, so we can put a point right there. But the amount of shells that are being produced is going to be 0. Nobody is willing to produce a shell at that price. Well, you know what? Let's switch colors to keep everything nice and consistent here. The amount of shells being demanded, put that in blue as 3. The amount of shells being produced is 0, in red here. That's the beginning of our story. Now let's creep up towards $1. Let's say we're at like 99 cents. Does that change the story at all? Well, the price has obviously changed from 50 cents to 99 cents, but if you walk through the entire story we just told, nothing is changing. Everyone's value is still above 99 cents, so all 3 of these folks are still willing to buy a shell, but all 3 of these folks are still not willing to produce that shell because all of them require at least $1 in exchange, and therefore the points will be at the exact same places, so you still have 0 being produced, and in terms of how many are being asked for, how many are being demanded, it is still 3. And so we can kind of draw a continuous line now. We see that for any price between 0 and $1, we have 3 shells being demanded, so this is a vertical line here, and we have 0 shells being produced, and that is a vertical line, which I'll put in hashes so you can see it over here. Nothing too exciting going on so far. Now, let's say we breach this barrier of $1. Now here's where interesting things start to happen. So now let's say the price of a shell is $1.01, just above $1. Things are going to change. How are they going to change? Let's go back to this group of folks here, the consumers. Who drops out? You may already see this coming. Let me spread these guys out so you can see it. Let's go ask this person who has a value of $1 whether they'd be willing to pay $1.01. They would not, because they would be shelling out an extra cent that they would not get back. They would basically be losing money if they were to make this deal. And so this person swims on back to the tank. Put them back there. Now these two folks are still happy to participate in this microeconomy. For example, the sleepy fish here, of course they'd be willing to pay the $1.01 because their value of that shell is a whole $2. Oh, and I didn't talk about why their values are different. We talked about why the values of the producers might be different, but I think it's even easier to talk about why different people value the same good at different levels. For example, you just think of an apple at the grocery store. Some people hate apples, some people really like apples, and that itself, just your relationship with apples, is going to determine how much you would pay for an apple, and that applies to every other good in the economy as well. And so we have 2 consumers ready to participate, and the story also changes for the producers here. So again, the shell costs $1.01. Now, who of these 3 is going to join the economy? Did you guess top hat octopus? Well, if you did, you would be correct, because if the top hat octopus is going to receive $1.01 for his shell, and it only costs $1 to produce that shell, then top hat octopus is making profit and therefore is happy to participate in this economy. So now let's draw what happens when the price is just above $1. Uh-oh. Alright, so if the price is just above $1, then how many shells are going to be demanded? Well, now it's gone down to 2. So just above $1, we can draw a X right there for now. And just above $1, how many shells are being produced? Well, now that is up to 1. So things have changed, and we can connect these two with this horizontal line that just looks like this. And we can also connect these two with the horizontal line that just looks like this. Okay? And now we can tell the exact same story. We've already gone through this variation. Why not just talk about it again here? So between $1 and $2, let's say we start breaching the price towards $2. In the same way where we were going from 0 to 1, by going from 1 to 2, nothing really changes in the story. No one new is being added or removed from the microeconomy. You can confirm that for yourself. And therefore we get another vertical line that goes up from here. And we also get a vertical line that goes up from here. Okay? So now we have this shape here. And now we can just finish off the story. So let's say the price has breached above $2. Now this guy, Sleepy Fish here, is saying, no way, I only assign a value of $2. Oh, he stinks. So we can put him back in the tank. These two are still in the economy, but can you guess the last person who is going to join the economy now? Well, it's going to be Sunglasses, Cool Guy Octopus, because Cool Guy Octopus, if is going to get more than $2 for that shell, and only costs $2 for Cool Guy Octopus to produce that shell, then she's going to join the economy here. She's stick. She does stick. So we can put that right there, okay? And so for any price between $2 and $3, we're going to have 2 shells being produced, 2 producers, and a single consumer. So let's move these guys over here so I can actually draw. So we see that for any price between 2 and 3, we're going to basically jump this curve over here, and that's going to go up like this. And the same story is going to be true for the demand curve, just going the other way. So the demand curve is going to go down to $1, just like this, and then go up here. And the reason these are going up again is because between $2 and $3, nothing is really changing. No one is entering or exiting the microeconomy. The last part of our story is what if the price has gone above $3? So let's say the price is $3.01. Well, now even this guy who is willing to pay up to $3 is no longer willing to participate because it's just not worth it. I would not pay $3.01 for something I only value at $3. So he swims on back to the tank. And now we see this producer here is finally willing to enter the economy, because if they're getting $3.01 for something it costs $3 to produce, then of course they're willing to produce that shell. So for anything above $3, we have all 3 producers in the economy, and I need you guys to move again, sorry about that. So we have all 3 producers in the economy, and this is just going to go up to infinity here. And, sorry, I need you guys to move again. And we have 0 consumers, 0 people willing to buy shells at that level, and that's just going to go up here. So now, let's put everyone back in the tank for a moment while we assess the shape that we just drew. So everyone can go back there for just a second. And so let's take a look at the shape we just drew. So looking at the supply curve here, you can see now why the supply curve is upward sloping. Are there a lot of steps here? Yes, but that's only because we had 3 individuals in the economy. And so now I would ask you to think about, what if we didn't just have a producer willing to produce at $1 and $2, but every single range in between? So somebody who is able to produce at $1.01, $1.02, $1.03, even values in between that. And what you'll see happening is that this shape, these steps will get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until you don't really recognize them as steps anymore, but you recognize this as a smooth upward sloping supply curve. The demand story is the exact same. If you didn't just have these 2 values, you had people who are valuing the shell at $1.01, $1.02, $2.01, and so on and so on. These steps get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until we don't recognize this as a step function anymore, but as a smoothly downward sloping demand curve. And that is why supply and demand are shaped the way they are, because of individual decisions individuals are making about when it makes sense to enter and exit this microeconomy based on what the price is. Now let's talk about what the equilibrium point is going to be. So we talked about what would happen at various different prices, but of course in any real economy at a certain point in time, there is a single price for a single good. What will that price be? So I think, if you didn't even think about it, I mean, where in this diagram is the equilibrium going to be? Just kind of logically? Well, of course, I think most people would say right in the middle, where your supply and demand curves intersect. But again, this video is not about what intuitively makes sense without proving it. We want to think about what are the mechanisms that's going to cause the equilibrium to be there. And I think the best way to do that is kind of just look around that equilibrium that we think is true and see what would happen in those cases. So let's pretend actually the price is not at $2. Let's assume the equilibrium is instead just below $2, maybe at like $1.50 or so. So at $1.50, let's again bring the folks out of the tank who are ready to participate in the economy at that price. So at $1.50, we would have this guy who ascribes a value of $2, and we would have this guy who ascribes a value of $3. So these are the consumers who are in the economy at that point at $1.50. Who are the producers? Well, we only have this guy here because they are able to produce it at $1, and therefore they would make a profit, and nobody else would make a profit here. Now put yourself in the shoes of Top Hat Octopus. You know that nobody else, none of the other producers, are able to enter the market until the price gets to $2. You are the only one. And so you're thinking, why am I selling this thing for $1.50 when I could be pushing it really, really, really close to $2, like $1.99, right? So if you're basically selling it instead, and you propose instead of $1.50, I'm going to charge $1.99 for this shell, well, no, nothing's going to change. These two folks are still willing to buy. Even this $2 fish is still willing to buy at $1.99 because it is still going to be a net profit for them. And therefore, there is a force in the economy. There is a force in the microeconomy. For any price below $2, there is a force pushing it up, a force coming from the producer. Now let's tell the other side of the story. Let's say the price is actually above $2. Let's say it's at $2.50. Who is going to be in the economy? Well, we have still the $1 producer. We have now the $2 producer. This person has left. And so this is what the story looks like if the price is at $2.50. So we have two people producing and we have a single consumer. Now, who has the power? Who has the power is this person who values the good at $3. So they're saying, okay, currently I'm paying $2.50, but I'm going to instead ask that I only want to pay less than that. I want to pay all the way down to maybe $2.01. Why would they be able to get away with this? If this person said, I'm going to pay $2.01 for that good, they would be basically increasing their own profit because they're paying less, but nothing would change with the producers here. Both of these producers would still be very happy to make that deal because they would be making profit. Even this person who is producing the good for $2, if they can get $2.01 for it, they would be happy to make that deal. And therefore there is a force, a different force, this time coming from the demand side. For any price above $2, it's going to be driven down. And now you can think of this just as kind of a physics problem, right? You can think of this as kind of a spring. If it's below $2, there's a force that's going to be pushing it up. If it were to go above $2, there's a force pushing it down. And therefore, the equilibrium has to be that the shell is going to be priced at $2 in the economy. And if the shell is priced at $2 in the economy, who's going to be in the microeconomy? Well, you're definitely going to have this guy who values it higher than the market price. You'll definitely have this guy who's able to produce it for less than the market price. And you can kind of go either way on these two folks, but we'll just say they're in the economy as well. So both of these folks are basically going to break even at this price, but we'll just say they've entered the economy. And so you have two producers and you have two consumers, and both producers are able to sell those goods. And so you know what? Let's do one final concept here. Since we have all this set up, it would be a shame not to do it and talk about producer surplus and consumer surplus. So you'll notice here that there are some people who are participating in this economy here who are not breaking even. We said that these two folks, who are at $2 production and $2 consumption, are breaking even. So they're basically making a profit of $0. But these two folks are making a profit of $1. Why? This person was producing that good for $1, and they got $2 for it, and therefore they have a profit of $1. Similarly, this person here values the good at $3 and only has to pay $2 for it. Therefore, their profit is going to be $1 as well. So we have plus $1 on this side, and we also have plus $1 on the producer side. And how do we see that graphically? The way to see that graphically is actually very elegant. It is actually just the area shaded under the demand curve, but before we get to the equilibrium point. So all this area here, if you were to calculate that area, add that all up, that is the total consumer surplus. Why is that? Because, for example, let's say we have millions of consumers now instead, since we have this smooth demand curve here. then there are some folks who are willing to pay up to more than $3. Some people are willing to pay $2.99, $2.98, and so on and so on and so on. And so you ask each of them how much surplus, how much profit are you getting? And it's going to be the length of the line from how much they value that good down to the place that they actually pay for the good. And if you add up all of these lines, that's basically getting the area of this region. Similarly, the area we call producer surplus is right under that. So if we add up all of this area down here, which is above the supply curve, but before the equilibrium point, that is the producer surplus. Why? Because producers are getting $2 for this good. And again, assume that there are many, many, many producers. Some producers are able to produce it for as low as 1 cent, 2 cents, 3 cents, all the way. So if you ask this 1 cent person, what's your surplus? It's going to be the amount they get for it minus the amount they had to pay to produce it in the first place. So the length of that line, same thing for all of them up till this point. So if you add up all that, you get the area here. This is what we call producer surplus, PS. And this is, again, what we call consumer surplus, CS. And so those two together, if you add them up, is in some sense the value generated by this economy, the amount of profit shared among consumers and producers that's being generated by this economy. So hopefully, let's have everyone go back to the tank here. Okay, guys, thank you, thank you, thank you. So everyone goes back. Hopefully through this video, you're able to understand why the supply curve looks the way it does. Why is it sloping upward? What are the individual decisions that cause that? And why is the demand curve sloping downward? What are the individual decisions that affect that? And how do these two things work together? How do these two things interact based on the consumers and the producers that are in an economy? And so if there's interest, we'll do a lot more econ videos. I truly love the econ topic. I could just go on forever with it. For example, here's a thought experiment if you're interested and have stuck around this long. There are things in the economy called price ceilings and price floors. We can do a whole video on that. But the general idea is that somebody, usually the government, is going to come in and say something like, actually, $2.50 is the absolute minimum you can charge for this good. You can't go any lower than that legally, or else you're going to be in big trouble. Think about what that does. Does that still create an efficient market? Where are the inefficiencies if we can't go below that? And the equilibrium point is naturally below that. What's going to happen? Same thing for price ceilings. They would just be below. So for example, a price ceiling would say, you know what? You can't charge anything more than $1.50. You can't go above that, even though the equilibrium point is there. So that's a thought experiment for you. Anyway, thanks for sticking around. Let me know if you like the format of this video. Please like and subscribe for more videos just like this one, and catch you next time.